Drive home with Maggie and Perloff. Afternoons 3 to 6 on WSKO Syracuse, a Cumulus media station. The voice of the Central New York sports fan, The Score, 1260. Welcome to your home for local sports in Syracuse. Outside Box Score with Mark Rowlands starts right now.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Outside the Box Score with me, Mark Rowlands, your home for local sports in Syracuse, right here on The Score 1260. Great show for you today. No Josh, just me. But in just a few minutes, I will be joined by the wonderful Neil Adler, editor of Inside the Loud House, which is the Syracuse University fan-sided site. I've interviewed Neil a couple of times on the Man-Child Show with Boy Green. He's always excellent. Obviously, a lot of things going on in the world of Syracuse basketball. Game today against Youngstown State, but the past week has been a recruiting bonanza for SU hoops, culminating in last night, four-star Kyan Anthony, son of Carmelo, officially committing to come to Syracuse University to play basketball. So we're going to talk about Kyan Anthony as a player. We're going to talk about the future of Syracuse hoops and the present of SU basketball. SU obviously 2-0, coming off of a really tough win to watch against Colgate. I was at that one as well with Josh. Josh, like I said, not here today. Jim asked just how far had SU recruiting fallen off prior to Autry taking over. We're going to talk about that because it seems like Red is going out and getting some guys. Now, Elijah Moore had already committed before Autry took over. He committed under Boeheim, but you've got guys like Sadiq White, Donnie Freeman, Kyan Anthony, Luke Fennell. A lot of really talented players are committing under Adrian Autry. So it seems like SU basketball is back on the right track recruiting-wise. And we're going to get into all of that with Neil in just a few minutes. Like I said, he's coming on at 5 after 11. So we're just going to do a short segment here this morning. A couple other things to talk about in the world of local sports. Big weekend for the SUNYAC. Last night, my Oswego Lakers taking on the Plattsburgh Cardinals in their annual whiteout game. Why was whiteout game 4 of the season? I don't know. Kind of disappointing. I was hoping to maybe make it back for whiteout this year, but just didn't work out with it being so early in the year. But Oswego in a big game against Plattsburgh last night. We'll talk a little bit about that. And today at noon, one of the great rivalries in local college sports, Corsica. Cortland and Ithaca facing off at noon today in their big football matchup. So we'll talk a little bit about those. Cortland, of course, the defending Division III national champion in the world of football. So that matchup meaning even a little bit more on a day like today. We're going to take a quick timeout. When we come back, I will be joined by Neil Adler, editor, writer, Inside the Loud House, Syracuse Orange fan-sided site. Make sure to check them out if you haven't already. So we'll be right back after a quick break here on Outside the Box Score on the Score 1260. For the best local beer in Central New York, the only place you need to look is Myers Creek Brewing Company with 16 different beers on tap at both the Inner Harbor and Syracuse. The Palace, that is the Cazenovia location, Myers Creek has something for everyone. Want a bite to eat? Both locations feature a kitchen with delicious pizzas, some of the best wings in Syracuse, and much more. Make sure to check out our friends at Myers Creek Brewing Company, the official bar of Outside the Box Score.
Falling prices, fantastic selection. It's our final fall clearance, extended through November. 500 pre-owned at the used car and truck warehouse and everywhere at Drivers Village. Find yours at dvused.com.
Choosing the right candidates for any office can be difficult.
My office has lots of drama.
I share my office. But no matter what kind of office you have, if you're hiring, you need ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology finds the most qualified candidates for your roles fast. So, for any kind of office.
I'm really going places in my office.
Count on ZipRecruiter to find the right candidates for it. Try ZipRecruiter for free today at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Again, St. Bede's story. Jim was at the laundromat when he heard,
Myers Creek does, in fact, rule. Spelled it wrong, but it does, in fact, rule. What was this week's trivia result? Not good. It was just there were just 3 of us this week. We didn't have a full team, and it was a very tough week, questions-wise. I mean, there was some stuff that I considered myself to be like a halfway decent trivia player, and there was a lot of stuff that I had never even heard of. Really tough trivia week. I think we finished like 8th or something. It's not good.
For the Rich Eisen Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.
And we're back outside the box score with me, Mark Rowlands, your home for local sports in Syracuse, right here on the Score 1260. Pleased to be joined by Neil Adler, editor and writer over at Inside the Loud House. Neil, how are we doing today?
I'm doing well. Happy Saturday. Got a couple of good games coming up. Some nice news last night. Things are good. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. Pleased to have you on the show. And yeah, let's just get right into it because it is a big week for Syracuse athletics. Let's start with last night and the week really leading up to last night. The recruiting bonanza that's been going on at Syracuse for basketball over the past week has really been something else.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously the fan base was very eager for the decision by Kyan Anthony last night. It's been, he was offered a scholarship by Syracuse 2 years ago. So, people have been wondering what he was going to do for 2 years. And I've certainly been covering him extensively over those 2 years. And, it's just it's a great development for Syracuse basketball. Obviously, we know about his famous father, Syracuse legend Carmelo Anthony. But I think the thing to me that really is awesome about this is that, Carmelo and Kyan's mom, they both were adamant all along that this would be Kyan's decision. They weren't trying to steer him to Syracuse or anywhere else. And Kyan said all along that he was keeping his options open, that he was intrigued by potentially going to Syracuse, but he was looking at other schools, took other visits, etc. But the fact that he ultimately did decide to go to Syracuse, now some folks might have thought it was a lock all along. I didn't think that. But I think it just speaks to how the Syracuse staff, and let's remember that Jim Boeheim was Carmelo's head coach, and now it's Adrian Austri. So for Coach Austri and the rest of the staff to, they prioritized Kyan for a long time, and he's moved up in the rankings and is really coming into his own as a senior this year. For them to land a top 30 national prospect, and obviously all the, the context here with his dad, it's just an exciting development that kind of links the past and to the future. And this 2025 class is shaping up to be really nice, and they have a terrific incoming class this year with Donnie and Elijah and Peter from overseas. But I just think it's a really nice sentiment, and not to be a Debbie Downer, but on the flip side, I think if Kyan had said last night on Dad's show that he was going to USC, I think it would have just been a real downer for the fan base, the program, et cetera. And, I've maintained all along that if Kyan Anthony decided that he wanted to forge his own path, create his own path, not following his dad's footsteps, that would be totally great, and I'd wish him well. And I also don't think that would be a negative, on the Syracuse coaching staff in terms of the recruiting efforts. Because if he just decided he wanted to go somewhere besides Syracuse, what are they supposed to do? They showed Kyan from the minute they offered him a scholarship in November of 2022 that he was a top priority in this class. He had the official visit, an in-home visit. They went to a ton of his, EYBL games and other showcases and his games, in high school. So they showed him that he was a priority, and it wasn't about his famous dad and what he did at Syracuse. It's about who Kyan is as a player. But it's just I'm kind of going on here, but it's a really nice sentiment. It's a wonderful story. All the analysts were saying they thought he would go to, ultimately pick Syracuse, but he was being recruited hard by USC and Eric Musselman, who was recruiting him when he was still at Arkansas. And it's a great recruiting win. It's a wonderful story. I guess I'll close here, at least for right now, in saying I really hope that people don't expect Kyan to be Carmelo 2.0, because that's just an unfair expectation of a young man who has earned a top 30 national, overall player ranking. But I mean, it's just Carmelo was one of the best freshmen in the history of college basketball. So now maybe Kyan will come in with Sadiq White and these other guys, and maybe they'll win a national title or go to a Final Four. But let's just let him be his own person. But I'm so excited as an alum myself, and obviously someone who's been covering Kyan for a long time and very fond of his dad. I graduated 3 years before he led them to a title. It's just really cool. It's really cool, Mark.
And I do want to ask, because obviously everyone around here thinks they know about Kyan Anthony because obviously of who his father is, but you've been covering him for a long time. I want you to explain to the people, what kind of player exactly is SU getting? Get rid of the bloodline, get rid of the story. What kind of two-guard should SU fans be expecting in Kyan Anthony?
Yeah, no, it's a legit question, and I've watched him play in EYBL and other showcases. Certainly keep in touch with recruiting analysts and scouts about Kyan's game, and I always kind of look write about him. You'll mention that he's the son of Carmelo Anthony, but then you talk about him because he's his own person, and that's the way you should be doing it. He's a bucket getter, Mark. He shoots the ball really well from deep. He's been praised by recruiting experts and scouts for continuing to evolve his all-around game. It's kind of like with Elijah Moore, the freshman, from New York City this year. Both high praise in terms of their, long-distance shooting, but they're both have been working hard in their own respective ways to evolve their all-around game, to become three-level scorers, continue to work on their defensive, presence, rebounding, et cetera, playmaking, facilitating. But Kyan, no doubt, he is one of the best shooters in the 2025 class. But he's really come into his own. I mean, he's making a name for himself that has nothing to do with his. I mean, everyone knows that he's Carmelo's son, but he's making his own name, and that's why he's got these high rankings. He's a top 30 player. He's a top 10 shooting guard. I'm pretty sure that all of the main recruiting services have him as the number one prospect coming out of New York State in 2025. And again, you want to take recruiting rankings with a grain of salt, and once they get to the Hill, those recruiting rankings don't really mean much. But let's say that again. Syracuse just landed the number one player in the 2025 class coming out of New York State, which I may be biased, but New York State has a lot of good basketball players. So, but he has definitely been showing that he can get to the rim more, shoot mid-range and again from the floor, great. But just be more of a leader, be more of a facilitator for others. He was a junior when he was a junior last year at Long Island Lutheran, which was a top 5 national team, top 10 national team most of the season. He came off the bench and he was solid, and they play in the EYBL Scholastic, which is probably the toughest, high school basketball conference. And he was solid. I don't remember his stats. He might average like 8 or 9 points a game, but their season is about to come up, and he is going to be, I would assume, one of the starters, and he's going to be one of the leaders. And, actually last week, and I had a story on Loud House about it, I talked to Paul Biancardi of, the national recruiting director of ESPN on the phone last week. He makes time for me from time to time, just a really good guy, and he knows his stuff. And he said to me, Neil, if Lehigh, that's Long Island Lutheran, if they want to get back to the Chipotle Nationals, which is the 8-team tournament at the end of the year for a national championship that they were in this past year, if they want to compete for an EYBL Scholastic regular season title, Kyan's going to have to score. Kyan's going to be one of the leaders. he's going to have to do well for Lehigh to do well. And they've got a great team. And then one of their other backcourt guys is former Syracuse recruit and Nigel James, who's, I believe, committed to Marquette. But Kiyan is he, I haven't written a story about it, but I did see it online earlier this week. He's on the preseason watch list for Naismith, high school boys basketball player of the year. I'm not saying he's going to win that per se, but he's on the watch list along with Sadiq White. It's just, he has earned the rankings that he has, and I think he's going to have a really strong senior year. And we'll get to see Syracuse fans, and I'll obviously write about it and put it online. I mean, we'll get to see some of Kiyan Anthony on national broadcast because the EYBL Classic has some games, but then Lehigh will be in various showcases where sometimes they'll be on, the ESPN networks or maybe some other avenues, so I'll keep that. But we'll get to see him play, and it's just going to be, it's like I was so anticipating this, and I don't have inside info on Kiyan because I wasn't in, some guys, maybe I do, but not with him. But like people I talked to said they thought he picked Syracuse, but you never know until they actually make their decision. So I was optimistic, a little nervous. It had been like a whirlwind recruitment the last 2 years. And there was even one article last night. I think he had an interview with one of the national analysts at 247 Sports. I hope I'm not misquoting, but I feel like he said that he almost was like leaning towards USC at one point. And then, who knows what goes into that. And honestly, that's his private decisions. And I just wanted to know the fun. But I mean, he was really considering USC. This was, from my perspective, this was not a slam dunk for Syracuse. They had to work to get Kiyan.
I agree. Yeah, I never thought it was going to be a slam dunk. He came here, especially with Musselman going to USC. I think Eric Musselman's a hell of a coach, and he did such a great job at Arkansas. And personally, I think he got kind of screwed by Arkansas.
That's a story for another day. But he's a great coach. He's a personable guy, and he's an excellent recruiter. And hey, listen, I can understand the appeal of playing for USC out in LA. It's obviously a huge media market. Is there more NIL opportunities out there for Kiyan versus Syracuse? It's a bigger market, but obviously Syracuse is his dad's alma mater, et cetera. So, but look, if he had picked USC, I would have been surprised, but I wouldn't have been stunned. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. So, Syracuse coaches had to work at it and give him credit. And they were pursuing Sadiq White for a long time. He's a number 15 player per ESPN, 5 stars. And they've got Luke Fennell and Aaron Womack, who's a fast rising guy that I think will be 4 stars, when all is said and done. It's just a nice 2025 class. Now, Mark, as you know, all these recruiting rankings and team rankings and 5 stars and 4, it doesn't mean squad if they don't win on the court. So, you can't help but be excited about the direction, at least of the recruiting component for Coach Autry and his staff. And let's credit Brennan Strawn and Alan Griffin and Dan Engelstad and Alex Klein.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know Alex. I don't know him personally, but obviously I know of him. And, just from what I hear, I mean, he's been very instrumental in a lot of, different recruitments, and just, they're on a roll recruiting, and they've got a lot of potentially really awesome, recruitments that they're heavily involved in 2026, which I don't want to go off on tangents, but multiple 5-star guys. So, I mean, the recruiting aspect is really in a nice spot.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Alex Klein, because that's a guy, when SU first hired him, we sort of did a little bit of a deep dive on this show, my regular co-host and I, and we were stunned by the credentials of that guy, and finding out that he was going to be hired as like the general manager of SU. At first we were like, well, what exactly does that mean? This guy is doing a tremendous job with everything he's done for this program since being hired there. And I'm glad you brought up where the recruiting is right now, because this was a question I had in my Twitch chat earlier that I wanted to bring up, because it sort of reminds me of what we've seen with the football team, where, and this is absolutely no flack to Jim Boeheim or anyone that was on the staff previously. Maybe the recruiting wasn't exactly what we thought it was in terms of the job they were doing. Boeheim was always considered to be a top-tier recruiter and loved going into the living rooms and really bringing guys in. but it is interesting to see. And maybe it's just the fact that it is a new coach and Boeheim was here for so long. It is really interesting to see the sudden switch in the fact that we've got 2 5-star guys to commit under Adrian Autry and Donnie Freeman, who of course is playing now, and Sadiq White. And it's a lot more 4 stars. SU basketball was sort of doing the same thing as football, where it's like, all right, let's get a lot of 3-star guys and build a team around that. You know, maybe you get 1 4 or 5-star guy, but even recent super high recruits for the basketball team haven't worked out the way we thought they would. I thought Benny Williams was going to be a tremendous player for Syracuse. I was super high on him his freshman year, and sadly it didn't work out. So what is this aspect of, you know, the future? Should this be the new expectation, you think, for Syracuse basketball in terms of recruiting, getting back to bringing in some of the best young talent in the country? We saw him do it in the past with Carmelo and Derek Coleman and all these great high school recruits that SU had gotten. Even Dajuan Coleman was a super high recruit. Should we expect to get back to that place in the coming years for Syracuse after what seemed like a lull?
Yeah, it's all fair sentiments. And, you know, as someone that, again, you know, I went to Syracuse in the late 90s, been following the team since the 80s. Yeah, I think it would be completely fair to say that, you know, after Syracuse had what I would consider to be one of their golden eras from about 2009 to 2014, you know, didn't win a title, but
they were fantastic.
Number 1 seeds, you know, just tremendous, you know, deep runs in the tournament, winning, you know, conference titles or significantly competing for them. You know, I think after that first year in the ACC, when they started out 25-0, ended up 28-6 overall, unfortunately had that second round loss to Dayton. But after that, there's no question that Syracuse in a new conference, you know, playing, you know, ACC teams versus Big East teams, that recruiting took somewhat of a dip, and that their performance certainly in regular seasons has taken dips. Now, obviously, there's been a couple of nice runs, the 2016 Final Four, the 2018 and the 2021 Sweet 16. But yeah, and I'm never look, I love Jim Boeheim, and I'm old school and he's old school, and he's the second all-time winningest coach. But to say that maybe the recruiting took a little bit of a dip under him those last 2 years, I think that's fair. They also look at their records on the court, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he went to 5 Final Fours and is a Hall of Famer.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Amazing, all that stuff. But as context, yes, I 100%, Mark, I agree that there was a little bit of a lull. And I think that, you know, you bring in a new head coach, and Adrian Autry, who was obviously the associate head coach, it's not like he's an outsider, had just ridiculously strong recruiting connections in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore areas, the DMV, as well as, you know, New York City, you know, New York State and elsewhere. But then, you know, retains Alan Griffin, obviously GMAC moved on, but then you get Brendan Strawn and Dan Engelstad, again, with their own recruiting ties to the DMV and elsewhere. And then, like you said, Alex Klein, who, you know, is a former NBA scout and it is great at recruiting, player development, trying to get guys to the pros, NIL, blah, blah, blah. They have I think the staff is more, I want to say working harder than when Boeheim was in charge. It's just, there's just kind of like a reinvigoration, if I'm saying that correct. It just seems, you know, it's a new staff of Syracuse guys, though, you know, Syracuse family, other than, you know, well, not Engelstad and Strawn, but there's just kind of they're doing their own thing. And that's, you know, I love Jim Boeheim and I'll always be fond of him, but Coach Autry is doing his thing, and these other guys can really recruit. And, you know, hey, listen, Brendan Strawn was in Turkey over the summer, you know, checking out Jordan Smith Jr., a 2026 5-star shooting guard from the DMV, as he was playing for the under, I believe, 17 national team in the FIBA World Cup. I mean, I'm not saying Syracuse coaches haven't done that in the past, but that's the kind of stuff they're doing. They're getting after it, if I can be frank. And so, again, we'll see how that translates on the court this season, next season, beyond. But they've done a nice job with their 2024. You know, Donnie Freeman, they had been recruiting since I think he was in 8th grade, but then he released the top whatever and didn't include Syracuse. But then with Strong coming in and the team takeover ties and Autry being the head, they got Freeman. They obviously retained Elijah Moore. And then, yeah, like you said, they get Sadiq White, Kyan Anthony. And listen, I think Luke Fennell, he's been elevated to 4 stars. I think Aaron Womack is an underrated player. I've had scouts tell me that he's one of the top, frankly, shooters in the 2025 class, too. So, and then you look at some of the guys that they're after in 2026 and even 2027. These are guys that are sophomores in high school, but they've offered scholarships to one guy from the DNA who's ranked by some of the recruiting services the #1 national prospect in 2027, as well as some other top 20 guys. So, look, they're not shying away from the big boys. And that doesn't mean they're going to win out for every recruit. They didn't, run out for Acadian Lewis or, some of the other guys over the summer, but I like their 2025 class. And, Luke Fennell was kind of, at least for me, came a little bit out of, kind of was like, whoa, okay, this is all. But, he's playing in a pro league right now.
Yeah.
So, and Kyan is, like I said, a top 10 shooting guard. And Sadiq White is a 5-star player, one of the best, forwards in the country. And again, with Womack, we'll see if they add to the class. They have a few offers out there, and they could have Alex Costanza if he reclasses to 2025. We'll see about that. But, I think the future is bright. And to get back to your original question, I think the expectation should be that Syracuse is recruiting heavily in the mix for and landing high 4 stars and 5 stars. And let's just see what it translates to on the court. I just want to see this team get back to I want to see the team competing for ACC titles. I haven't really done that except for their first year, and I want to see them competing for top 4 seeds in the Big Dance and getting to the Sweet 16 or further. I'm not expecting Austria to win like the next 5 national championships, but there's no reason they can't get back to some of those really significant teams that just did a lot of damage nationally in the 80s, the 90s, obviously 03, and then, like I said, from 09 to 14, they were winning 25 plus games every single year. That's what I want to see.
And I don't want to keep you too long, Neil, but we do have to talk about the team this year. And I've gone to the first 2 games. I was there for the LeMoyne and Colgate game. I'm not going to be going this afternoon, but there's a lot of questions about what we've seen on the court this year for Syracuse basketball. Now, going into this season, I was very high on the team. I'm still very high on the team. I love Donnie. Right. I hope we saw more from Elijah Moore in game 2 against Colgate than we did in game 1. He only played 2 minutes. So, I liked what I saw out of Elijah Moore a lot. But there are a lot of questions, specifically on the defensive end of the floor. We've seen this defense struggle, especially in transition. What do you think now after 2 games against one not as tough opponent as I thought they would be going into the season in LeMoyne? They obviously, after losing to SU, got the doors blown off of them. But an always tough opponent in Colgate. I give Colgate a lot of credit. I don't know if they should be scheduled in non-conference because I'm afraid they'll beat us every single year now.
They're a legit team. They're a legit team for sure.
Yeah, they certainly are in the Patriot League. So I know it's 2 games in. I know it's early reactions. There's a lot of season left, but has your preseason expectation for this team changed after watching them for 2 games?
No, I don't know if it's changed. I feel like ahead of the season, I do some projections and stuff, and I feel like I had them winning like maybe 21 or 22 games in the regular season. I still think that's feasible. Maybe they'll win less. Maybe they'll win more. I think it's understandable to have some kind of pause or some kind of concern about, especially on the defensive end. But like you said, Mark, it's been 2 games. Colgate is a legit team that frankly should have won the last 3 meetings before this year.
Yep.
They won 2, then they blew a 24-point lead, and then this year they could have won. Syracuse missed 3 1-and-1s late in the game.
I was going to say probably should have won this year too.
Yeah, and a Colgate guy, they could have won, and then I believe he fell down at the end. So anyway, Syracuse escaped. In some respects, it's like having these close games early, but coming out on top is like a little bit of optimism there, just because they're grinding out even when they're not playing at their peak and finding ways to win. Again, certainly beating Colgate by a narrow margin is understandable. Yeah, the LeMoyne game, nothing against the Dolphins, but yeah, they got I think they played UConn that next game. They got crushed.
No, it was they played
was
UConn
it
in
UConn?
Game 3. It was Cal State Northridge, and they lost by over 20.
Okay, yeah, and I don't want to compare Syracuse to UConn, but I think that there's certainly plenty of offensive firepower on the team. It's a question of shooting from deep. How are they faring, and having crisp ball movement and getting the ball inside out with the guys in the front court, and then certainly all the shooters out on the wing. And certainly with 12 scholarship guys, and hopefully Chance Westry is going to get some run today. Coach Autry absolutely has depth on this team, and if he wants to play up tempo and fast and all that, that's great. For me, yeah, it's really all looking at how they're faring on the defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
Giving up, I believe it was 80 plus points in the first game, and then this last game it was low 70s. It's not even about the points that they gave up. Again, they won the game. It's about transition defense. I mean, geez, this last game against Colgate, what was it, 22-2 in fast break points?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry if I'm getting it complete, but I mean, you get the gist. It was
a lot. It was a lot to a little.
Yeah, and that's just discouraging. And listen, Mark, Syracuse in recent years, one of the Achilles heels, at least, anecdotally, and understandably, has been rebounding. And in their first two games, they've not, I don't want to say dominated on the boards, but they've had clear advantages in rebounding. So, and they haven't, at least in this last game, I don't remember the LeMoyne game, but this last game against Colgate, they didn't commit a ton of turnovers, but just getting back on defense. And then when they're in their half-court defensive sets, it's all about it's a team with 7 new guys, 4 transfers, and 3 incoming freshmen. So they got to be communicating. They got to be operating as a cohesive unit, whether they're in man-to-man or zone, and it's keeping guys in front of them or closing out on shooters, or if a guy gets by one guy, someone helping. I feel like the help side defense isn't that great. So I don't think they're necessarily going to be the same Syracuse defense of the 2012-13 season when they were just locked down in the tournament and shut down Marquette and Indiana. But they could be, as long as they can kind of hold their own, and then their offense, certainly they've got plenty of scoring and abilities, again, inside and out with Donnie and Eddie, and then all the shooters. Just getting that defense. And another thing that I'm kind of curious about it as the season, hopefully they don't have too much trouble with Youngstown State today, no disrespect there, but next week they've got the Legends Classic, where they've got Texas and then either Texas Tech or St. Joe's, I think, and then they've got at Tennessee coming up, and Maryland and Brooklyn. I mean, and then they'll have some early ACC games. For me, it's just, how are they faring against tougher competition? Are they getting the doors blown off? Because that was my one frustration with the team last year. They won 20 regular season games for the first time in a decade with a new head coach, replacing a Hall of Famer, and a ton of sophomores. Westry and McLeod were injured. Ben Williams, his situation. So they won 20 games, I thought it was a solid year. But just in a lot of those games, ultimately, I mean, they would kind of keep it close, but then eventually it would just be wide margins. So
they got embarrassed in Maui. That was the big thing. I know it's Tennessee and Gonzaga, but it didn't fill you with confidence for the rest of the year, seeing them get dominated in those games.
Right.
It just showed you that that it was not the SU of old.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, if my memory serves correct, I feel like in both games, they were kind of still hanging around at least midway through the second half, but then things would just kind of fall apart down the stretch. Yeah, and that happened with some other games. And, that's going to happen. I'm not saying every game a team loses is going to be by 2 points, because that would actually be very crushing. But so for me, it's, how is this team doing defensively with their chemistry? What are the rotations looking like, as Autry, kind of figures things out, combos and that sort of thing, especially as they get into tougher non-conference games and into ACC play? Is he still playing 10 guys? Is he playing 7 or 8 guys like Boeheim was playing, in recent years? But the defensive side is definitely something we'll have to keep an eye on. The rebounding has been encouraging. And, in terms of offense, I feel like this is a team that's got a lot of a lot of guys that are athletic and quick, and they need, get some steals, get out in transition, and not be down 22-2 in fast break points. Flip the script on that.
Yeah, that's tough. Neil, last one, since you
Sure.
do it all at Inside the Loud House, there is also a football game today. SU
There
traveling to Cal Berkeley, long storied conference rivalry, Syracuse and Cal. And taking on Cal Berkeley at 3:00 today. SU currently a 10-point dog to a Cal team that is, quite frankly, better than I thought they were going to be coming into the year. What do you think about Syracuse's matchup today on the gridiron, and where do you see this game maybe going?
Yeah, the Cal game is a little tough to kind of decipher, just because they're heading out to the West Coast, new ACC school. I believe that the two teams have played each other like twice all time, and it was like in the late 60s. Cal's one of those teams where it's like they've I'm just pulling up my last article on them because just to refresh my memory. I mean, they've beaten Auburn, they've beaten San Diego State, Oregon State, Wake Forest, but then they lost to Florida State, which is not a good team.
Yep.
But then Miami, Pittsburgh are both good teams. So the thing with this, and I actually don't. I know I'm a disloyal alum here, but I'm forecasting Cal to win 30-27. But Syracuse could win this game. The 10-point spread is, I don't get that at all, but I'm not a Vegas guy. I'm not a betting man. I mean, the thing with Cal is they have a pretty good defense. I'm looking here. They're, as of, last week, they were number one in the ACC in scoring defense, just under 20 points a game. Number 2 in the league in yards allowed. But they're not a dominating rushing team. Like Boston College obviously whooped up on Syracuse, on the ground, and the Golden Bears are like, one of the bottom teams in the ACC in rushing yards per contest. So long story short, I feel like, they're playing an unfamiliar opponent, so to speak, on the West Coast. But they certainly can win this game. And, assuming that their defense kind of holds it together better on the ground, and if Kyle McCord's doing his thing, I picked Cal to win. Maybe I'm just trying to jinx myself here, but I certainly think Syracuse can win this game, and it would be nice. I mean, the game last week was a bummer. They certainly could have won that game. Obviously, their rush defense was not good. But then again, the week before when they beat Virginia Tech, they won that game, and they could have easily lost it. So it's like, this team could be, they're 6-3, they could be 8-1, or maybe they could be 5-4. It's just those things where they're playing a lot of close games, and I think if their defense holds it together, maybe they get a few takeaways, and the offense is clicking. I think they can win the game. It's just again, Cal's got a pretty good defense, so we'll see how it all shakes out. But it'll be fascinating to watch. It's still weird to see Syracuse traveling to Cal to play an ACC football game. I think it'll be a close game.
You know what? At this point, I'll take a close game after, I know it was pretty close last week, but come on. Thank God Cal doesn't run the ball very well, because I am getting real sick and tired of watching SU get dominated on the ground, especially when we have LaQuinn Allen, and they never seem to use him properly because of how the offensive line play is. So
yeah, I mean, certainly there have been some issues on both the defensive and offensive lines, no question about it. Hopefully they can. And there's, to be fair, there's been some injuries, but then again, every other team in the country has to deal with it. That's the nature of sports. But yeah, I do think that given that Cal is not the same type of rushing team as like a Boston College, I like Syracuse's chances better. And but they're missing some key guys, and other guys are just going to have to step up, and we'll see. I think it'll be a close game. The 10-point spread, if I were a betting man, Mark, I would take Syracuse all day long for that.
Well, at least I like that. I like to hear that, Neil. Neil, my friend, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, Mark, no, totally a blessing to be on your show. I really appreciate it, and thanks for thinking of me, and we'll definitely talk again soon.
Absolutely. Neil, have a good weekend. And I understand you're in Tennessee. Is that correct?
I am. I'm with my son. Yes, he's in the Nashville area, so I'm with him, and he's excited to watch some Volunteers football later on. They're playing Georgia, and he's got his own basketball game, so we're excited about that.
Oh, nice. So enjoy your weekend in Tennessee. Go Cuse and go Vols. All right, have a good one.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your brother, man.
All right, there he is, Neil Adler, editor and writer over at Inside the Loud House. We've got to take a break. A little overdue here, so we'll be back in just a minute on Outside the Box Score.
All Mixed Up is your holiday shopping destination, offering the
Yeah, that was a long one. Hey, Mitty, it might be no. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna delete a couple of spots in here, and we're gonna double up this break, and then we'll come back and we'll be more on track. There, we'll be good. Yeah, I saw that 8-year extension for Indiana's coach. What was the I didn't see the actual payday. $72 million. Wow. Hey, listen, man. If you start out 10-0 with Indiana, you absolutely deserve that deal. Yeah, the annual retaining bonus of $1 million that's fun. That's fun. How is he at coaching the round ball? Yeah, have him coach everything. Yeah, throw this guy on the hardwood. Yeah, exactly, Jim. Sign that contract before Ohio State dog walks you. Yeah, that's no good for Signetti. Like I said, if you start 10-0 at a school like Indiana in football, that you absolutely deserve that.
Serving up a tasty brunch experience every weekend. Start your day with their early bird buffet special, just $19.95 for adults and $11.95 for kids from 9 to 10 a.m. Or indulge in their brunch buffet from 10:30 a.m. till 2 p.m. for just $27.95 and $16.95 for kids. Don't forget, reservations are a must. Call 315-677-3303 to secure your spot at Logan's Restaurant today.
And we're back outside the box score with me, Mark Rowlands, your home for local sports with Syracuse, right here on the score 1260. Always a pleasure to talk to Neil Adler. Great interview. I'll be putting that one up on social media after the show today, in case you missed it. Nice long interview talking about everything going on with SU basketball right now, the recruiting, the team this year, the future of the squad, and looking ahead mainly to next year, but where everything is going with this program, because I think right now they're in a great spot. And then, of course, had to talk about the SU football game today against Cal a little bit as well. I want to go to the D3 side of things. Now, as people who listen to this show for a while know, I am a very proud Oswego State Laker alum. WNYO, my first ever radio station, hosted a show there, was the play-by-play voice for the men's basketball team. I did baseball. I did women's volleyball, softball, all sorts of stuff at WNYO. And it's really the reason I am where I am today, being able to bring this show to you. So I'm very proud of my time at SUNY Oswego. And last night was a big night for my Lakers. Whiteout. Game 4 of the season, a little early in my opinion. I know they alternate fall and winter for when they do whiteout, but I would have liked to see this one a little later in the season. But nevertheless, big win for my Lakers. 5-1 over the Plattsburgh Cardinals in the, what's it called now? It used to be the Murano Campus Center. Now it is the Deborah Stanley, the Deb Campus Center. So at the Deb last night, 5 goals from 5 different players on Oswego last night. Only one coming in the first period by Brandon Cohen, and then 4 more coming in the third period. Jesse Horacek, Travis Baker, Connor Gatto, and Cam Simons all adding a goal in the third period. Awesome showing by the Lakers last night. Sadly, I was unable to listen to the WNYO broadcast, but I did check a little bit of the WTOP broadcast, student television station at SUNY Oswego. And great job, as always, by the crew at WTOP. I wish I would have been able to listen to WNYO last night. I was unable to, but a great job by the folks at WTOP. Always doing a great job. SUNY Oswego continuing to pump out some really talented young broadcasters, as well as clearly some really talented young hockey players. Oswego, they were 0-2-1 going into this game. It wasn't looking like a great start for my Lakers, but it's always great to get a big win against Plattsburgh. That's the type of thing that always fires this team up, and hopefully they go on a little run moving forward this season. So, as always, go Lakers, and go Oswego hockey, and beat Plattsburgh. Also going on in the SUNYAC, big SUNYAC weekend. The Cortica Jug, Cortland, Ithaca, going on today at noon. I believe this one will be in Cortland. Yeah, so it's in Cortland. Cortland, of course, coming off of a national title last year for Division III football. And with that, this is always a super fun game. You can stream it through SUNY Cortland Athletics website. There's a radio broadcast as well if you want to listen to it. But you can watch the game live for free through SUNY Cortland. And I'm glad it's back at the Cortland Stadium. I believe it was last year was at Yankee Stadium, which is very cool. It was either Yankee Stadium or the Meadowlands or something like that, and which is very cool. But this is the type of game that I think is best played as a home game for one of the teams. The Red Dragons taking on the Ithaca Bombers at noon today. So make sure to check out the live stream if you want to watch some really fun Division III football. I know I'll be tuning in to at least parts of this game. I don't remember the last time I missed a Cortica. At least part of the game. So Pat says it's at Ithaca College. The Red Dragons are scheduled to take on the Ithaca Bombers at noon, field at the SUNY Cortland Stadium complex, according to the RedDragonNetwork.org. So I believe it is at Cortland, which is fun. I'm going to go to Cortica one of these years. It's a game I've always wanted to go to. And yeah, there you go, Pat. Always trying to correct me, Pat. I can read. You got it right up in front of me. But I've always wanted to go to Cortica, so I got to make sure I get out to that game one of these years because it seems like an absolute blast for those who attend. And yeah, I'm glad it's not at a neutral site because that Cortland campus today is going to be rocking. We got to take another timeout. We'll come back in just a second here on Outside the Box Score with me, Mark Rowlands, your home for local sports in Syracuse on the Score 1260. If you're a fan of local craft beer, the only place you need to go is Myers Creek Brewing Company with 16 brews on tap at both the Cazenovia and Inner Harbor locations. Myers Creek has the best selection of locally brewed libations in all of central New York. Want a nice hazy IPA? The Velvet Fog is a must try. More of a traditional Pilsner, how about the Floatin' on By? And for you sour drinkers, the It Takes Blue to Mango. So crack open a cold one with the official beer of Outside the Box Score, Myers Creek. Hey, thanks, Jim, for putting the link in chat. Yeah, it starts in just 10 minutes. Hi, Mara. Glad you're in here. Can't wait to watch SU take on Youngstown State today in basketball. Just a classic non-conference rivalry. Josh picking apples or leaf raking. Josh is at brunch right now. He texted me at about 10:20 this morning, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not making it into the show. I got a brunch." I'm like, "A brunch?" He's like, "Yeah, I got a brunch." So that's where Josh is. Hopefully he'll be back next week. I don't know if this brunch will become a weekly thing, but I hope not. With Josh being that high class, trust me, he isn't. It's with it's with when he went to a wedding a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, whenever that was. He was at a wedding in Lake George. It's that married couple. So yeah, I agree, Mitty. Funeral acceptable. Brunch? We're talking about brunch here. He said he's gonna watch the show back later. So Josh, when you get to this point, really, dude. Had he skipped the wedding, he could have skipped the brunch. That's true. He was in the wedding. He couldn't skip the wedding. He was part of the wedding party for the groom. I was fine with him missing the show for the wedding. That's perfectly okay. Which SU team covers today? I think football has a higher chance of covering than basketball. I don't think SU basketball should be a 12.5-point favorite over anybody right now. I like what Neil said about I'm glad that Cal doesn't run the ball a ton. And when they do, they're not great at it. That gives me a little more confidence. I understand it's Youngstown State, but it was also LeMoyne. Jim. So right now, I'm going to say SU basketball shouldn't be a double-digit favorite over anybody. Because LeMoyne, I was hedging my bets going into that game about how SU would perform, but come on, man. I wouldn't take SU as a favorite over Corcoran right now. And we're back. Outside the Box Score with me, Mark Rowlands, your home for local sports in Syracuse, right here on the Score 1260. Some high school sports to talk about quickly. We had a big game last night. Class AA, Section 3, sectional final at the JMA Wireless Dome. Cicero North Syracuse and Christian Brothers Academy, two teams that continue to face off in the sectional finals. It seems like these two teams are there every year. CBA claiming yet another sectional crown for Class AA. They went 11-0 this year, 21-13 victory over CNS last night. We saw Indian River take down New Hartford last night as well in the B section sectional championships. General Brown beating Bishop Ludden 19-6 in the Class C sectional championships. And I really wanted to talk about my Corcoran Cougars taking a sectional final this year in football. But they end up going down to Whitesboro 35, excuse me. I'm glad it wasn't 53. 35-20. I wasn't able to catch the game, Mara, but I was keeping up, following some live tweets on Twitter, and it just seemed like Corcoran never really, Whitesboro would score, and Corcoran would, try to get it back, and then Whitesboro would just go right back at him. Whitesboro 14 unanswered in the third quarter, and never really felt like they were totally in it. It was bad snaps were killing them, according to Mara, apparently. That's tough. I mean, it's just fundamental football. And when you lose a game because of the fundamentals, and Whitesboro didn't even pass, really, 8 of 11 for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns for their quarterback, whose name is Memphis Ferguson, by the way. Incredible name for the Whitesboro quarterback. Memphis Ferguson? I need this guy at like a Mac school immediately. But he also led the way rushing the ball, 20 attempts for 133 yards and a touchdown. They had 237 total yards on the ground in the game with 3 scores. Jim says Oswego High was off this week. Yeah, that Oswego football program. I don't know, man. Boy Green was a running back at the Oswego High School at one point. So goes to show how their football program is. No shade, of course, to one of my colleagues, Boy Green, but he loves talking about his time as a running back at Oswego High School. So just had to throw that little jab in there. But like I said, no shade at all to Oswego and Oswego or Boy Green. SU Cal, 3:00 today. SU Youngstown State at 1. Big Q Sports doubleheader. As you're warming up for that SU game, why not watch a little bit of Cortica? Jim put a link in our Twitch chat, which, by the way, I should have plugged today. If you like listening to the show and you want to see a live stream where I've got a chat in here that I interact with throughout the show, we've got a camera set up. I'll talk to you during the breaks. You get a little behind-the-scenes peek at Outside the Box Score. You can always check out twitch.tv/marker_box. Follow me on Twitter where the show is streamed as well. Also at marker_box, or go to the Score 1260 YouTube channel. The show is also live on all 3 of those platforms all the time. Also, of course, available on the score1260.com and the Score 1260 app. But Jim was talking about in the chat during the break which team is more likely to cover, SU football or SU basketball. SU basketball, 12.5-point favorite over Youngstown State. Syracuse football, a 10-point underdog, going to Berkeley to take on Cal. Out of those 2 options, I'm taking the football team. SU basketball hasn't shown me enough yet that they can cover a double-digit spread, 12.5 points. I don't care if it's Youngstown State. I don't care if it's SUNY Oswego. I just don't trust SU on that number yet. They might get there, but not right now. I don't trust SU on that number. But I do like SU football to cover the spread. I could easily see SU football winning this game against Cal, coming off of a tough loss last week to Boston College that we didn't even really talk about today because it hurts me. But we did get the Boston College quarterback to enter the transfer portal and sit out the rest of the year, so that's fun. Thomas Castellanos no longer affiliated with Boston College. He left the program and is going to enter the transfer portal once that portal opens up in the offseason. So I guess that's a positive. SU made a quarterback transfer. I guess you can look at it that way, but still not a great showing by the Syracuse Orange last week against a Boston College team that, in my opinion, they very easily could have beaten. That's going to wrap it up for the show. We'll be back next week, same time, same channel, 11 a.m. right here on the Score 1260. We'll see you then. Peace.